When I did a video back, I think in January or February of this year on Michael Bisping and Anthony Smith going their separate ways, it got a lot of views, but more than that, it got a lot of negative comments directed towards Anthony Smith. A lot of people criticized Anthony for leaving the Believe You Me podcast in the way that he did, because Michael Bisping came on a show and was like, I just never heard from Anthony. Then I just saw him starting his own YouTube channel. Best of luck. And people said, man, Anthony acting childish, or I don't even know what all the reasons were, but a lot of people, including myself, I thought maybe there was something about Bisping that made him difficult to work with. And because the relationship was getting strained, Anthony Smith finally had enough and left. That was my thought as to why he would leave in the way that he did, according to Michael Bisping. We're going to go through this entire ordeal to some extent again, but with a whole new perspective, because Luis Gomez, who originally was the co-host for the Believe You Me podcast before Paul Felder, before Anthony Smith, he left several years ago as well, but he opens up and he gives the full lowdown as to what happened and why Michael Bisping was so difficult to work with and why he had to leave. And we're going to go through that account, as well as we're going to contrast it with Michael Bisping's account as to why Luis Gomez left. And we're going to use that to revisit Anthony Smith's statements. And what I want to say at the start is I think everybody who was criticizing Anthony Smith, take another look at everything when I lay it out in this video. I actually think instead of criticizing Anthony Smith, now in light of all this information, I think we should be praising Anthony Smith for the way in which he handled leaving the show. Yeah, he should have maybe could have communicated better. And he himself says communication is an issue for him. But if you think about it, he kept it all positive. He didn't say one bad thing about Bisping. And after hearing Luis Gomez's account, man, I bet you there's way more to the story that Anthony Smith, because he's an upstanding guy and because he doesn't want to air out dirty laundry, I think there's a lot of things he could have said that he didn't. So credit to him. Again, don't have any inside sources. I'm not saying this for a fact, but hey, if he's going to do this to in the past, Michael Bisping, I mean, I would be hard pressed to believe that it's not continuing to happen. On top of that, last thing I'll say on this, and then we're going to watch this clip. The last thing I'll say is just look at how Michael Bisping talks to Harrington on the show all the time. Harrington's the behind the scenes guys. This guy in this photo right here, he's super hard on him. Now, Harrington can probably take it, and that's why he's still on the show and seems to roll with the punches. But if he talks to him that way on the show, clearly showing that he gets irritated, he has a short temper, a short fuse with him. If you guys are constant watchers of the show, you'll see this. Imagine what he says to him probably off air. I got the vibe, and again, this is speculation, so I want to be careful not to draw too deep of a line in the sand or make too strong of a conclusion based on what I'm observing from the show. But it definitely feels like Michael Bisping's got that very, very difficult personality, a very prickly personality to work with. And I think that's creating some of these issues and some of these people, the turnover that he's experiencing on the show. But anyways, let's go back to Luis Gomez being on the show, Michael Bisping's account as to why he left, and we'll contrast it with Luis Gomez's account. And remember, Luis Gomez was not an MMA guy. He's a comedian who's a fan of mixed martial arts. So check this out. First, we're going to hear Bisping, and then we're going to turn it over to Luis.
Me and Luis, well, it's like, this sounds weird. But
by the way, he says this sounds weird. I included this piece because this is insane. I showed another hilarious clip from a show recently where him and Paul Felder are talking about a museum, and then it's a touch museum, and they go down this really weird path. I think it was just based on a miscommunication. Both of them were misunderstanding each other, and it got into a really bizarre conversation. But now I'm like, this is another one of those instances. It's from more than 3 years ago. I don't remember this, but man, what a funny way to describe his relationship with Luis Gomez. Check this out. This is ridiculous.
Can you imagine you get two people, like normally in a relationship, you need the high energy, slightly crazy one, let's say that's me. But then the flip side, you need the calm one, which is Rebecca. And typically they're the relationships that work. Now and again, you see a relationship where there's two people, they're kind of crazy. And the sex is wild. The sex is explosive. They're fucking like fucking rabbits every fucking day and every fucking night, okay?
Look at Harrington's face. Okay.
And the sex is great, it's explosive. But then they argue like a motherfucker. Now, I'm not saying I've been having sex with Luis, okay? In fact, I just want to categorically state I have never once had sex or penetration or kissing or anything with Luis. But
what were all those noises I heard when Brian and I were staying there a few months ago?
Shut the fuck up, Harrington. You signed an NDA. No. The thing is, but the arguments have been there, right? Because we're both two alpha males, and I'm not saying this I'm not slagging Lewis off. I've got a lot of respect for him, and we're going to remain friendly. We've both grown over these years. Remember, we're not like childhood friends. When Sirius put us together, then we worked on the podcast, and we did a great job. But we're growing in different ways. He's doing really big things in the comedy world. He's taking off big time there. I'm doing my thing. We're kind of drifting apart, and we've been clashing for a while. People don't see it off there, and I'm not saying it's Lewis. I'm just as much as a handful as well. Do you know what I'm saying? So for those reasons, and I just can't deal with those arguments that we used to have off air. And I know it's disappointing to some people, and it's disappointing to me. It is, but I've made my decision, and we're moving on. And he made his decision, and he put out the video, and that was very gracious of him. He said he's not really invested in, studying the finer points of MMA and even watching less than the fucking main and.
Okay, so there we go. Now there's a couple of things I want to break down and dissect a little bit. First of all, he did talk about, I guess, in his original statement that he's just not as invested in MMA anymore. He does revisit that point and touch on it again here, but there's way more to the story. The second thing is he said, hey, we're both alpha males, that's why we clash heads. But then you had Anthony Smith, then you have Paul Felder. I imagine those are both alpha males, but maybe they took on more of a subservient role with you or whatnot, and maybe that's why it worked. I don't know, but if you're getting MMA fighters, I feel like they're all going to be alpha males, so how is it working now? But anyways, it's a very general response as to why it didn't work and why Gomez had to move on. But now we're going to hear Lewis explain exactly the nitty-gritty of what happened. And from the way that he explains it, I feel like he left and tried to leave earlier than this, but he left because it's mistreatment, in my opinion. I'll talk about the specifics as he explains them, but you can start to see, like, if this is how Bisping approaches these partnerships and approaches people being on a show, very controlling, very demanding, especially when these guys have other things going on and he's asking them to make big sacrifices. I can see how somebody, especially like Luis Gomez, would have a problem, and maybe why Anthony Smith potentially had a problem as well.
Me and Bisping, we just stopped, it stopped being the right show. Long before I left, it stopped being the right show for me. I didn't really give a shit about MMA anymore. It was very much the Michael Bisping show. I was kind of growing into my own thing, right? We were doing it for a while. I was just his sidekick, and it was the Believe in Me with Michael Bisping. And at one point, I outgrew that role. If you look at my shows now, every show that I do is 2 or 3 times as popular as Believe You Me. And that's not a knock to Believe You Me. It is what it is. I have more popular shows. And
I do think it's kind of a knock. I don't know, though. He's saying it because he's saying he outgrew the show, maybe meaning in terms of his popularity or his presence on the internet, and it no longer made sense to be the co-host. So I guess maybe it's not a slight. But I remember the first time I heard that, I'm like, well, then why did you mention that? It does seem like a little bit of a slight, but on second thought, maybe it's just justification. Okay.
Yeah, at one point, I tried to leave the show a year before we got into our thing. And yeah, he ended up convincing me to stick around, against my better judgment. We were very different during the whole pandemic. You guys remember, like, I know Bisping now is like a fucking company man, and
This is crazy. So everybody rips on Bisping for being a company man. I don't know if I really see it, but maybe Lewis maybe has an interesting perspective because he saw a change. He saw a transition. From my recollection, I don't know. I mean, a lot of times he does work for the UFC. I don't see him being such a problem that it makes me not want to watch Bisping. Yeah, he's part of the UFC machine. He's supporting a lot of the fights and the matchmaking and the events, and I don't know. But anyways, it's just funny to see somebody. Lots of people do it, and I don't think it's fair. But it's interesting to see it coming from Luis Gomez, who's known him and been with him for such a long time.
He sort of follows Dana White's lead, and I haven't watched it, but from my understanding is now he's fucking talking about how everyone was dumb about the pandemic. But if you listen back to the old episodes, he would call me a fucking idiot. And when I questioned the lockdowns and questioned the pandemic, and he was one of these rich Hollywood elites going, "Stay home, yeah, mate, stay home, don't go to work." And you're like, bro, it's easier for you to stay home. You're a multimillionaire. Like, most people can't just stay home.
I don't remember any of this, by the way. In full disclosure, I don't remember him saying that or being on board and then switching sides at some point later on and becoming more in line with Dana White's perspective. I actually don't remember that. He remembers it. I mean, he was there. He probably knows best. But anyways, I just want to throw that out there. But I did think it was interesting to include.
So we butted heads a lot about that stuff. If we ever talked about any social or political issues, we started having a very big difference of opinion. And when we went out to do that tour with him,
here's the important part. This is the really big part. So what a lot of people allude to is that Bisping is controlling. He's got a short fuse, and we can see that on the show. We can even see it in little bits and pieces when he blows up sometimes a Harrington for being late to jump on the screen, or you know what I mean. He just throws these little jabs out there. It seems to indicate that he does have a hair trigger temper, and he's not afraid to let people know when he's frustrated. So it appears that way, but now when he tells this story, I think it really shows a behind the scenes look at just how controlling he can be. Because to me, what Lewis explains here, I mean, we'd have to hear Bisping's perspective as well to get a full understanding of what's going on. But man, it's like what he asked Lewis to do and sacrifice monetarily. It seems pretty wild. And then asking him to do additional work and not compensate him for it, like it just doesn't seem very considerate. So check this out.
He painted it as me saying like, oh, I'm a headliner. And I like that. It wasn't me pretending that I should be headlining over Michael Bisping. That's retarded. Michael Bisping had his own shows. I was warming up for the shows. And I booked myself some headlining shows on the off nights of that tour. And he made me cancel those shows because I don't even know why. I was just trying to make money, as much money as possible when I was out leaving my family for a full week. And he was like, yeah, mate, you can't do that. I wasn't even listed on his shows. I wasn't listed. It wasn't Believe You Me with Michael Bisping and Luis J. Gomez. It wasn't, an evening with the Count Michael Bisping with your opener, Luis J. Gomez. I wasn't even listed. So me selling my own tickets for my own shows on off nights wasn't taking anything away. He was just fairly controlling and he wanted things to be his way. And we bumped heads over that. And he made me cancel like $12,000 worth of shows. And
just going back to the alpha male thing, right? He's like, hey, 2 alpha males, you're going to fight all the time. But really, I think what it sounds more like, again, this is just from Lewis's perspective. We'd have to hear Michael's to give them both a fair shot at explaining their sides. But what it sounds like to me is he wanted it run his way. And Lewis was one of the people that was actually willing to stand up to him and be like, hey, I feel that I should be able to do this. I feel like I should be able to make this extra money because I'm on tour and these are great opportunities. I'm not even listed on the bill. And he's pushing back. And that's what's causing the argument. That's what's causing the issue. That's what it at least appears to be to me.
The argument ensued because originally I was booked to just open his shows and do warm up. And then in the middle of the entire process, he asked me if I can come on stage with him and sort of do a producer role and pull stuff up on the computer and almost essentially be a Harrington while he was.
Okay, so now he's asking him to cancel stuff and then he's adding on to his role and not providing any additional compensation. Look, I run a business myself, and I feel I have a pretty good perspective on this. Yeah, I don't agree with that if that's truly how it happened. If you're asking somebody to take on an additional role and they're just doing it for free, you're not compensating them on an hourly basis, something like that, right? That doesn't seem fair to me. On top of that, he also asked him to get rid of those shows. He's saying up to $12,000 he lost because he couldn't do those shows. Now, unless he had a really strong reason as to why he shouldn't do them. Hey, man, you do those shows, you come in wasted, and you're not able to do a proper show for me, and you agreed with me to do these shows prior to you taking on those additional obligations. It's compromising your ability. I can't have it. Like if there's some serious reason and this is causing him to go back on an agreement that he made prior to booking those shows, I can kind of understand that. But you see the two things happening simultaneously. He's not letting him do the shows to make the extra money. Then he's asking him to do more work without extra compensation. It all goes back into that narrative of being hyper controlling and potentially not being the most considerate person when asking people to do things.
He was on stage and I didn't really want to do it. And I agreed to do it begrudgingly. I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. And then when he made me cancel those shows, I was like, well, dude, I didn't ask you for more money when you asked me to do the computer stuff. I just, I said I would do it. And he got very mad that I brought that up. And then he ended up having his friend do it instead. And we sort of bumped heads and got into a big argument about that. And that was sort of the end of the show.
And I don't see why you would get so mad to bring that up. I think that's a fair thing to bring up. Maybe something you could discuss as opposed to just like blowing up and getting mad about. Anyways, he wraps it up as that being the end, the maybe final straw, if you will, to sever their relationship, at least professionally. Now, he does say multiple times in this video, maybe I didn't include all of it, hey, it's all good, no love lost. But I mean, when you get into the nitty gritty, it doesn't sound like the most amicable split. So while I didn't find any great clips of him interacting with Harrington, something that I mentioned, I did find this clip that I'd flagged not too long ago when Bisping's son joins the show. I think this is emblematic of what might be happening behind the scenes. You could just see like how quickly Bisping's temper just flares and he gets kind of aggravated. Just watch this just for a little bit of context. Here we go.
To the boys, this is Paul Felder.
What's going on, everybody? How we doing?
Get it over here so you can see.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, shit, what have you done?
I didn't touch anything.
Everything went black.
It.
You said that you're not even in the shot card.
Where's the shot?
Lean over here.
Oh,
there we go. Stand up. He's just finished in the MMA gym. What were you working on today, Cal? Come down here a bit now.
Oh, I don't know what you want from me.
Well, just
wait, he's about to get so mad. But look, he just literally told him to stand up, and he's like, "Come down." And he's like, "I don't know what you want from me." And then look how mad he's getting. Like this, it's not his son's fault at all.
line yourself up. You see
In the
yourself.
way.
All right,
You are in the way.
line yourself up a bit so you can see. There we go. Get in here.
I'm in here, man.
Say hi to the legendary Irish Dragon.
How are you? What's going on?
What's up, man? How are you, brother?
Yeah, I was expected to make an appearance, but
No, so we're having some Wi-Fi issues. I just texted a second ago, bringing the hard line. Ethernet cable. Well, just pay your respects to Paul and get out of here.
I'll pay my respects. Thank you.
No, no need to.
Do you
what,
accept
what did you
them?
work? What did you work on in the gym today? What did he work on?
We just. I've lost you. Hang on.
What did you work on?
Warmed up, pad session. We did five rounds of pads. We did grappling situationals, takedown.
See, I don't know, man. Paul, it just seems like Bisping is hard to do stuff with. Like he just barks out commands. He's even doing it to his son. Now I know there's always going to be an interesting father-son dynamic. Obviously, we all have one. My dad's kind of like a no-nonsense, tough guy as well. So I completely. I'm not saying that he's doing anything necessarily wrong, but I'm just saying you can see how Bisping likes to carry himself, runs the show, be authoritative, as he puts it, be an alpha male. But yeah, when his temper flares, he just boop. He can't hold it back in. He just lets it rip, and I think that's what you saw. Now we're gonna revisit Anthony Smith's statements after leaving the show. I made a video, and then I get like a lot of other people were making videos, and so I guess he felt the need to finally address everything. But think about all the things that Lewis said, and pay very close attention again to all you Anthony Smith haters who have so many negative things to say about him. Oh, you left the show in such an unprofessional manner, this and that. Now think about all that stuff. Think about the way that you see Bisping talk to Harrington as well online. And I'm a fan of the Bisping show, by the way. I might come off to people who may be watching this channel for the first time that I'm anti-Michael Bisping. I'm not. I think he's actually a great commentator and does a great job on the show. That being said, if this is the truth and he's difficult to work with, I think it's fair that we talk about it, especially in light of what has transpired. But anyways, the people that gave Anthony such a hard time, listen to what Lewis said. I guarantee you some of this had to have affected Anthony Smith as well. But he does not say one thing about it. He doesn't bring up one negative thing about Bisping. He basically shoulders all the blame for him leaving and why he left and all those things. So I think there's a lot of credit owed to Anthony Smith in light of Lewis's statements. Check this out.
On the full disclosure, I'm a really bad communicator. Some of it is I don't know. I'm just not a great communicator. I would imagine all my friends and family, if anyone.
And yes, I know there's two of me. I couldn't find the original clip of the Anthony Smith thing, so this is me playing the same clip on our channel. Whatever, it is what it is.
If they would ask what's Anthony's biggest flaw, they'll say he's a terrible communicator. I just float through life and I do my thing, and I'm just trying to keep my head above water. And even from us working together on SiriusXM, like you have to find sometimes people just have to find a way to help me do whatever I'm doing. Because that's just how I am.
Absolutely. It's even when you want to do things, like things you're passionate about and things you enjoy, there's too much going on sometimes that it's genuinely, I typed a message and it didn't send, or I just didn't get to it because I have 10 other things going on at the same exact time.
For sure. And so I say that because there has been times where Michael has gotten frustrated or upset where, like I didn't communicate, like, oh shit, I'm in a different country, or I just go, and sometimes I can't look any further than my hand in front of my face. And then a lot of things get missed and I forget about them. I get distracted and I didn't do a good enough job at times of communicating. I never argued that. I always agreed that anytime you had a problem with it, you're right. Like I gotta be a better communicator.
You see, not a single thing negative was said about Michael Bisping. And now, again, upon reflection, after hearing Luis Gomez, I gotta believe there's more to this story. I mean, how could everything just be Anthony Smith's fault? Now, he did say Bisping would get mad or upset or angry, whatever. Yeah, I'm sure he had a short temper. He has a short temper, and so he's lashing out. But the way Anthony Smith makes it seem is that it was all deserved. Whatever repercussions he got, it was because of his own mismanagement of his time and his communication. Now, another thing I want to point out that Luis Gomez said is he said at the beginning of that clip, I was doing all of this for a very small percentage revenue of the show or whatever. Now, Bisping's shows continue to grow. If guys are coming on later, like Anthony Smith or now Paul Felder, I bet it's even smaller. And I'm not saying that's a bad business move or Michael Bisping's cheap or anything like that. That's actually fair. He has built the platform and built the show up over the years of consistent podcasting. So for somebody to come on at this point when there's this much momentum and this much revenue being generated, it makes sense that they would get a smaller share. But my point is, the way that Luis Gomez describes it is, if he says a very small share of revenue, my assumption is he felt it was smaller than what maybe would have been fair. I don't know. Again, speculation, so don't hold me to these statements, but maybe they are paying on the slightly lower side. Maybe Bisping is tough to negotiate with, or maybe he's justified and there's just a disagreement in terms of how much compensation is being received. I only say all of this to say that perhaps this was also part of the equation, dealing with Bisping, if he is indeed difficult to work with, as I'm hypothesizing, that on top of the fact that maybe guys aren't receiving the most amount of compensation relative to how much work they're putting in or what they're contributing, that could also be a factor in terms of why Anthony Smith decided to leave. We got one last clip here where Anthony Smith, a lot of people, including myself, were theorizing that maybe some of the times where we'd see Michael Bisping talk to Anthony Smith on the show about his training, about what he was doing leading up to a fight, his mentality, and almost cautioning him from continuing to fight because he just felt like his mind wasn't in the right place. A lot of us thought maybe the way that Michael Bisping would talk to Anthony Smith on air indicated that he talked to him even more harshly, for his own benefit, of course, but more harshly off the air. Anthony Smith got sick of it, and that's part of the reason why he left. Anthony Smith right here actually denies that, kind of defending Bisping and saying, look, man, of course I can take it. I'm actually really happy with my life. I'll let him explain. But the only reason why I want to revisit this clip is that may be true, that when he was giving him critiques or advice on how to approach his career, that wasn't at all an issue. But it does beg the question, maybe the general way in which Michael Bisping carries out his business or treats people on the show or whatnot, according to Luis Gomez, maybe those were part of the contributing factors that got Anthony to a point where he's like, you know what, I just want to do my own thing, be in a different environment, run the show, etc. It's a theory, but I think something worthwhile to consider. Check this out.
Thanks. The narrative that Mike was too tough on me and I couldn't take it. Listen, like, I know if you're just a regular, run of the mill person, that this might be hard to believe, but like, I'm super fucking proud of what I've done in my career and what I've done in my.
So there you go. He is very happy with, I guess, where he's positioned. I think because the implication of this notion was that he's not doing enough. He needs to do more. And Michael Bisping is trying to guide him in the right direction. He doesn't want to listen. He's like, look, everybody's looking at me like I'm a failure. He's like, shoot, I fought at the highest level, which he has. He commentates at the highest level. He is an analyst at the highest level. Me and Justin talk about this all the time. We don't understand why Anthony Smith gets so much hate in general. I think he's a great analyst. I think he did tremendous things as a fighter. He fought John Jones. Yeah, he didn't become a champion, and people seemed to get on his case for not becoming a champion. Most fighters don't become champion. So anyways, this is his quick response to, nah, it wasn't because he was too tough on me. I was fine with that, and I'm happy with where I ended up, and I'm really happy with my career. But it may not have been just the toughness or the talks in regards to what he should be doing training-wise or whatnot, but there may have been similar issues that he was dealing with to what Luis Gomez was dealing with. I'm just saying, if that happened before, of course, it's likely to happen again unless there's some big transformation that happened on Bisping's side. So, thought it was worthwhile to revisit this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I want to know about a couple of things from your guys' perspective. Number one, do you think my read on Michael Bisping and how he might be off camera and even how he is on camera in terms of Harrington, do you think my read is on that he is quite maybe theoretically tough to work with? Number two, when you think back now on the entire Anthony Smith situation, do you agree with me that it seems reasonable there's likely something more to the story than what Anthony Smith was saying? And last but not least, have I changed your mind about Anthony Smith whatsoever? Do you have a newfound respect for him maybe, especially in light of what Luis Gomez said? And then if you think about what Anthony Smith said, he took all the blame. He did not say one thing that Bisping did that was difficult to deal with or anything. And there's always two sides to the story. There had to have been something that Bisping did, right? There had to have been, but he instead takes the entire blame and just talks only about the things that he did wrong. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.